The Radio Wammo Breakfast.
Suckling on the teat of tech.
With Paul Brislen.
Yes, let's talk high tech. Mr. Paul Brislen's with us, deep in the bowels of good morning of Telecom. What are you doing in the Emperor's Tower?
I'm walking the halls of the new offices. They're actually quite funky-looking offices, I must say. No, it's their half-yearly report, so I'm here to hear all the financials.
About how they've ripped off New Zealand over the past year and how much money they're going to feed the shareholders. Is that right?
Well, we're $4 billion down on the year before, so I don't know we'll be too mean to them. But, certainly it'll be interesting to see just what they've got to say, although hopefully to find out a little bit about the structural separation and ultra-fast broadband.
There's one thing Telecom likes to do, oh, the poor me, oh, the poor giant, the poor friendly giant.
Well, it's the corporate way, isn't it? I seem to know several telcos that do that as well. They, and others also. They're all quite happy to tell you just how poorly off they are.
Yeah. Hey, while you're in there in the bowels of Telecom, tell us about this 2 Degrees announcement. Are they getting some kind of investment from a Chinese outfit?
Yeah. So the technology provider Huawei has extended them $100 million credit so that they can invest more in the network. So what they're going to do is expand into other centres. At the moment, they're in Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch, and I think Queenstown. They're going to expand their network footprint into other main centres.
That's going to be a good thing.
Yet, but listen, the more investment, the merrier.
Yeah.
I'd say. That is fantastic. That means all up, I think they're probably looking at about $400 million network build. That includes all of their operating expenses as well, not just the network, but it's about $400 million now, so it's no small change.
That pays for the ads as well.
Good. Yeah, it pays for all the ads, the coffee breaks, the private jet, whatever you want to throw in there. I don't think they have a private jet.
That's got to be a positive thing, though, because from my experience, 2 Degrees network in the main centre is really good, but of course you end up, once you're out of there, roaming on Vodafone, which is a little bit more expensive. So if they can expand their network, it's got to be good.
That's right. In one respect, it increases their costs because they've got to buy a network, but in the long term, it reduces their operating costs because they're not paying the roaming charges in many places. So that's really their game plan, is to use Vodafone's network where they have to and expand their own footprint, and then pass as much of it on to the customers by the sound of things.
Yeah, indeed. Now there was something else going on in the cellular side of things this week. Some kind of odd internal email inside of Nokia.
Nokia, bless their cotton socks. Poor old Nokia. They've had a bit of a battering lately. They used to be the darling of the cell phone world. They still are. Nokia Siemens is still one of the biggest network builders in the world, and they're doing quite nicely. But Nokia itself, with its cell phone platform, Symbian, its operating system, is just not holding its own against the likes of Apple, Google, and even RIM. BlackBerry's manufacturer RIM from Canada. So they've had a change of the guard. They've got a new CEO. He said, imagine we're a man standing on a burning platform floating out to sea. Your choice is being roasted alive or diving into an icy cold ocean and having the shock of that. And he said this in an internal email to staff, and it's being interpreted as batten down the hatches because the Axeman cometh, and he's going to chop entire divisions out of the way and make Nokia into a lean, mean fighting machine once again.
Couldn't they just solve all their problems by
simply and cleanly?
But by still manufacturing some really good handsets. They make some great handsets, but whacking Android on it.
That's exactly right, and that is what most of the observers are saying they should do and should have done years ago, months ago, is get out of Symbian, forget about trying to be all things to all people, dump Symbian and move to the Android operating system from Google and push that barrow and really cause some major trouble for Apple and for the other Android manufacturers. And if anybody could do it, it would be Nokia. And I hope they do, because that's exactly what both Android and Nokia need.
Yeah.
Android suffers a wee bit from the possibility of fragmentation, because anybody can do anything to it. Anybody does do anything to it. So you can get some really weird versions of it coming out. You want to avoid all of that, what they call in software terms, forking. I want to take it in a slightly different direction to everybody else, so I'll build a slightly different version, and then you lose all of that economies of scale that you get. So Apple doesn't suffer from that, because Apple doesn't let anybody do anything. So they've locked it down entirely, and only Apple can sell Apple's operating system.
Yeah.
But with Android from Google, if Nokia were to get on board, At the moment they're pinning their aspirational stuff on Samsung and Motorola to a little extent, and if Nokia were to jump on board, well, that'd just cause all kinds of ructions. That'd be fantastic.
And what would Nokia wouldn't be losing anything? They'd still make the handsets.
Well, no, that's it. But these companies, they get it in their mindset that they've got a vertically integrated monopoly. They own the handset maker. They own the operating system. They decide who gets to be a developer. You just can't move that slowly in this environment when you've got Apple and Google eating your lunch. And Nokia is still the world's number one selling. The Symbian is still the number one operating system for smartphones. But in the last year, it's gone from 40% market share to under 30% market share, and that's just going to accelerate if they carry on. At the same time, they have made a commitment to all the Symbian operating system developers, so they do want to have a think about how they transition that. But I think you've got to do it. You've got to be cold-hearted, cut it off at the before it rots away the whole company.
Just finally, here's the latest going on Al Jazeera TV right now with the situation in Egypt. I'm going to turn up the volume on that particular one. There we go.
Or they have been prevented from reaching many Egyptians because they are not being shown on state television, not to mention that Al Jazeera, which is one of the most popular channels here...
They're saying that the protests in Liberation Square are being shown on state television, which is a huge change from what has been going on in the past. Normally, they'll have nice pictures of Mubarak going on while there's these protests going on in Liberation Square, because he's had control of the technology up until what it seems now that everyone's back online. All the information is getting out, and there looks like there's going to be some kind of changes at the top in this next hour.
It does sound like it, doesn't it? The question I heard asked before is, have the military pushed him, and they'll take over in the interim and make it a sort of a military coup in effect.
Which is a problem. Which is a problem for the people.
It is. But I think the military's played it quite smartly up until now, and not being too politicised. And I think what they would do is say, okay, we'll form an interim government so the whole country doesn't fall apart, and we'll have elections as quickly as possible. And move it swiftly to a democratic footing.
But the key thing there, though, is that the military are, as you say, being the nice guys. But Mubarak was a military man himself 30 years ago before he came into power.
That's right. And don't forget that the reason the West loved him so much is because he did some things that they actually wanted, which, namely recognising Israel as a legitimate state and not. And being the first Palestinian, the first Muslim and Arab country to recognise them. So, he was a good guy once upon a time. It's just that he's hung on, and the last round of elections looked so foolish. This is where technology and the internet in particular comes into play so very nicely. It's impossible to block. They've discovered that the hard way, and the people are using A, for information, and B, to get organised.
Yeah.
I mean, that tent city in the square is in part due to people getting organised via text message and social media.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. The internet is a democratising force. It's just phenomenal.
Well, talking about getting organised, the smartest minds in the country, and you and me, will be heading up to Warkworth this weekend for something called Food Camp, which I'm really looking forward to. Just about a whiskey drinking
unconference.
Unconference.
That's right. Yeah, I see people asking, so how do I go about putting forward my proposal for a session at Food Camp? And everybody's saying, you just rock up and stick it on the wall, and if we like it, we'll attend, and if we don't, you're on your own.
That's right.
And that's the beauty of it, is you just don't know going in what it's going to deliver on the day. And it could be anything from, let's talk about whether or not we need a code of sort of human rights for the internet for New Zealand to make sure that nobody tries to use an internet kill switch to knock us offline.
Yeah.
Maybe we want to talk about infrastructure build around the country. Maybe we want to talk about privacy in the era of WikiLeaks. I don't know. Anything could happen. Anything could happen.
The future of broadcasting.
And I'll be there with our honky noses and whiskey bottles to provide amusement and merriment.
Look forward to it. I'll see you there, Paul.
Can't wait.
Cheers.
Sounds good.
It is